We are taking you inside the courtroom for the Lori Vallow Daybell trial. This is her second in Arizona. It is a conspiracy to commit murder trial. Now, we expected to be here today talking about opening statements, talking about jury selection first. Then we expected maybe to get to opening statements today, but instead, none of that happened. Instead, some fireworks in the courtroom. Erica, fill us in with what happened when you went in this morning.
Yeah, so Andrea, we knew that she was going to be in court. I confirmed with the sheriff's office. That was the concern last week. The judge told Lori Vallow Daybell, if you can't make it in, let your team know, if you have to quarantine or something. So we had indications that she was sick. But today, things got underway as I was able to get into the courtroom. They let media in just a few moments after they actually started the hearing. And as I walked in, the judge said, well, sometimes we need to move forward even if we're feeling under the weather. So we're like, uh-oh, this is going to be an issue again. So as the media filed in, people filed in, not the jurors yet. We are waiting for those possible jurors to come in. You kind of hear this argument between Lori Vallow Daybell and the judge. Lori claiming she's really sick. She does not want to be there. She said, we'll unpack all of this, Andrea, but she claims to have been dragged out of her jail cell bed to be in the courtroom today when she did not want to be in there. So she's claiming she's really, really sick. And just to set the stage for you guys, this is her third trial in under 3 years. And this time she's being accused of conspiring to kill her niece's ex-husband, a man named Brandon Boudreaux. This case is out of Gilbert, Arizona, and Vallow Daybell, who is representing herself, has pleaded not guilty. Of course, Andrea, she's already been convicted in Idaho for killing her children, Tylee and JJ, as well as her role in the death of Chad Daybell's first wife, Tammy Daybell, Chad Daybell being Lori Daybell's current husband now. He was convicted in that case too, currently on death row. And then just back in April here in Maricopa County, Arizona, Vallow Daybell was convicted of conspiring to kill her former husband. So it's been a lot of court for her, but I will tell you, Andrea, this is a new one. I've never seen her be sick or act sick, whatever you think may have happened there today. But what are your impressions on just the delay before we take people right inside so they can hear for themselves what happened?
Well, you can't help but wonder, because last week we heard her make several arguments about not being in front of this judge, making a note that she had reason to think that he was biased. And so you can't help but wonder, and you wonder if the judge is wondering, if this is an attempt to delay or to find another reason to not be in his courtroom. That obviously comes into play. And at the same time, you recognize that we're humans and we do get sick. And so you also have a little bit of sympathy there, thinking that would be pretty difficult to be in there, to sit in a courtroom if you're not feeling well. I know she talked about, being sick and having chills and things like that. If you feel ill, that probably isn't your best moment, right? So I'm interested to see kind of and hear what the judge thought and how he responded to her pleas or her requests.
Yeah, it was, a big moment, I would say. We've seen the tension, as we've talked about before, leading up to this moment between Lori Vallow Daybell and the judge. And today was just really another day where you could tell the judge was frustrated. Lori was really putting on, quite a demonstration inside the courtroom. And we want people to hear for themselves. I'll give you guys some warning that the audio or the video quality from the courtroom is not very good. Because this was jury selection, we had to take the court's internal feed. So the quality of video is poor, but the voices you can hear pretty clearly. And what Lori Vallow Daybell had to say, she didn't mince her words. Take a listen.
Ms. Daybell?
No, in the courtroom, sorry.
Lori Daybell for the defense.
All right, are we ready to proceed with jury selection?
No.
Why not?
I'm sick, Your Honor. I've been sick all weekend. I let my team know yesterday I was sick.
Can you please pull the microphone a little closer? I can't hear you very well.
I'm sick. I've been sick.
Have you put in tank orders to get treatment?
Yes.
Are you being housed in the infirmary?
Nope. I'm housed where they put people in quarantine anyway. I'm housed alone. They would not move me from where I am.
Have they tested you for any communicable diseases?
No.
All right.
You asked me to let my team know. I let them know yesterday at 9 a.m. that I was still ill.
Sometimes we're in positions where we have to proceed when we feel under the weather.
It's not just under the weather. I'm very ill.
Do you have copies of tank orders you put in for treatment?
Not with me. I put it in on the tablet.
Is the DO able to check whether any tank orders were put in?
I can pull down their pitch, but I don't know when she put it in.
What's that?
I think it takes about 24 hours.
They haven't even answered my tank order yet. It takes them a long time.
So what symptoms are you having?
I have a terrible headache. I have nausea. I have chills. I have a fever, probably. I haven't been able to keep very much down besides broth and oranges.
Would you be willing to have one of your advisory councils complete the 40-year process, jury selection?
Would that waive my ability to represent myself for the rest of the trial?
No.
Then can I have a moment to discuss with them for a second?
A couple things. I'm your trial judge. My instructions are to complete your second trial. So even if for some reason your sickness worsened and we weren't able to complete this trial and had to declare a mistrial in this trial, even if this case got delayed into June or July or August to be reset, I'd still be your trial judge. Additionally, last time we did jury selection on your first trial, as I recall, you asked between probably about 5 and 10 minutes of follow-up questions of the panel before we sat the jury. I only mention that in the context of not a lot of it is expected of you at this point in the trial. Depending on how you're feeling later, we could talk about whether the opening statements would have to be further bumped to tomorrow. But I would like to keep this trial on track. So if you want a few minutes to talk to your advisory council, we can do that. Is there anything the state wants to put on the record before we do that?
Not at this time, Your Honor.
All right.
So it seems he had the same question, that judge trying to, Judge Bresky saying, if this is a ruse, if this is a attempt to perhaps thinking that you can delay this long enough that maybe it gets assigned to another judge, making it very clear that's not going to happen. And also, let's just talk about kind of what he was saying. He was asking for proof, right? He was asking for proof from the jail. Did you put in here in Ada County, here in Boise, the jail she was housed in during her former trial? They call that a kite. And they were talking about tank orders. Different correction facilities call them different things. But essentially, it's an inmate's request to be seen by medical staff, right, letting them know there is an issue. And she said, I'm being housed by myself, again, standard procedure, especially if, given her charges and given her history, her convictions in the death of 2 children, very common for those inmates with charges like that to be housed separate for their own protection. And so, and of course, in the protection of her case as well. But just to kind of lay that out, it sounds like the judge was thinking the very same thing. And also saying, are you sure you can't hang in there for just, you kind of just get to sit there, maybe you talk for a few minutes, but can we make this happen?
Yeah. And Andrea, it's interesting. We've, as we were unpacking this today here at 12 News, we had some defense attorneys in, and something they said was like, regardless of what she's doing, the judge has to be really careful here, because whether she's actually sick or not, and
Sure.
I'll attest to this, having, covered her for the past 5.5 years, seeing her in courtrooms, I've never seen her like this before. That doesn't, mean she's never been that way. I don't know her personally. I've never met her when she's been sick, but she had said, and we'll probably get to it in a little bit, but she had said that in the past 5.5 years that she's been incarcerated between, Idaho and Arizona, she's never been sick like this, except maybe one other time. And it wasn't during, a trial proceeding like this, especially when something's trying to get underway. But it's interesting because she's been the one who's filed against this judge
Right.
saying, you haven't given me a speedy trial. You haven't, I want to
Sure.
move this forward. She wanted to start while the other trial was still going on here. So it's interesting to see that she's the one who's like, well, what do you mean we can't wait a few more days for me to get better? And you can tell that that puts pressure on the rest of the courtroom. And, I think Judge Boreski, we've talked about this before. He doesn't always have a poker face, we'll say, but you can tell he tries to keep his calm, his cool.
Yeah.
And you could tell he was really frustrated with everything today. But again, you can't really blame someone if they're sick. There's safety concerns in that. And if
Sure.
Lori Vallow Daybell does have something, you heard him ask, did they test you for communicable diseases? She said, no, not yet. Not sure if they will. There could be concerns for possible jurors. There's concerns for anyone in the courtroom, her team, that they could maybe get sick as well. So I understand why we're where we are at here, but it's just very interesting timing, all of this.
Well, and her demeanor, definitely. I mean, just even the way she was speaking. I know that we talked about the video being very pixelated. You can't really get a good look at her face, but just in the way that she was carrying herself and the way that she was talking, for sure, very, very muted, very, very, very calm, very stoic almost. And that isn't the Lori that we normally see, especially when interacting with the judge. So, we've seen meek, but this did seem a little bit different. I think you're right.
Absolutely. And, after this point in the, proceeding this morning, the, judge said, okay, you can have time to talk with your team about this. And this is the first point. Again, I mentioned we were let into the courtroom. Media and the public are waiting outside. We were let into the courtroom a little bit after it sounded like things went on the record this morning. So we didn't get to see her come in. So this was really the first time we saw that she did not, she was in a wheelchair, which is something we hadn't seen before. There was a deputy actually pushing her. So that was something that we didn't get to see until, she went out to talk with her team and came back in. And that, you hit the nail on the head. The demeanor is not something we've seen before. It was certainly quite the moment when she came back into the courtroom to let the judge know what she decided to do. And we will get to that after this break.
So she asks for a moment to talk to her team and ask them, should we proceed? Presumably asking them, what does this look like if I don't stay here, if I go back to the jail and you continue these jury selection proceedings without me? Of course, the judge also thinking about these people who he has now housed here, right? He's brought in a large group of people hoping to get to that jury of 16 that he needs to seat. And so he's probably also trying to be very mindful of that as well. So he gave her that time to think. And so what happens after she comes back?
Andrea, and, that time to think, it was probably a few minutes. We were waiting in the courtroom and we're all kind of realizing that, okay, things are not proceeding as we thought they would today. Again, we were expecting to get that jury seated, get to opening statements. But as I said, she was kind of wheeled back in and her head was on her, hand like this. It was just, she looked like she did not want to be in the courtroom in any way, shape, or form. Take a listen to what she had to say after talking to her team.
Ms. Daybell.
I did discuss with my advisory council. They are not comfortable doing that. I do have a right to represent myself. I'm sorry that I'm sick. I did not plan on getting sick. I did not try to get sick. This isn't anything to do with anything other than the fact that I'm incapable of going forward and doing a good job representing myself. I've been incarcerated for over 5.5 years. I've only ever been sick one other time in the whole time I've been here.
All right. State want to be heard?
Judge, obviously, if the defendant is sick and she does have a right to represent herself, we understand that the concern is the state does need a date certain when we're starting. I have witnesses that I rescheduled already once to fly in this week, assuming we were starting today. I obviously will need to reschedule them again. I can't keep rescheduling them every single day onto a new flight. So I am not sure how we want to proceed at this time, if we want to give the defendant a couple days, see if this jury is available to extend out to the 25th. I know we had originally talked about that, and begin on Wednesday. I don't know if she will feel better by then, but that's the only suggestion I have at this time, other than starting all over again at another date.
Is there a reason I couldn't proceed with some of the oral voir dire this morning? Because other than introducing herself, she wouldn't be expected to do anything this morning, and that way we can at least get rid of some of the jurors that, for whatever reason, would need to be excused.
Judge, my concern is she's in a wheelchair now.
Well, I would probably ask to have her sit in a regular seat and not be in a wheelchair that says MCSO across the back of it.
Your Honor, I am just not capable of going or even sitting here. I need to be laying down. I need to be getting better so that I can go forward and actually represent myself. I hope that I feel better this week and we can go forward. I can't give you any promises. I can't control any of this.
Okay, so she's saying, I don't even want to sit here and do that, right? I'm not capable of even sitting here. And she said, I have to go lay down. And so making it very clear, of course, again, the judge just trying to find any way to make some progress. It sounds like, as you said, unusual. This is unusual, and he's trying to figure it out as he goes as well.
No, they are, and it also so is the prosecutor. And as we're sitting here listening, it sounds like the prosecutor, Trina Kay, this is the same prosecutor in her first case here in Arizona. So she knows Lori Vallow Daybell. She's gone up against her before. She's representing herself, and she successfully got a guilty verdict in that case. So she's really strict with her playbook here, and I feel for her because it is hard to schedule witnesses, especially some coming out of state. We know up your way, Andrea, Ray Hermosillo, the detective in Idaho, there are people coming from different places, and little delay can really push something back significantly, especially when you're trying to coordinate flights. So I understand that. And of course, we've talked, on Inside the Courtroom before on just the toll this takes on witnesses. So if you're someone preparing to speak at this trial, maybe someone who's been impacted by this case, it sucks to have to hear, okay, wait, we're waiting another day. We're waiting another day. I can imagine it's probably an anxious time as we're trying to get things underway here. And it was interesting. I want to go back to Vallow Daybell's demeanor because again, we just hear this. This is a new voice from her that we're hearing. We haven't seen her sick, but she's still kind of pushing at the judge who's trying to just move things forward, inch things forward as much as he can, saying, well, can't I just ask my questions like I would normally? Like, do you need to do that? And, she still said no. And he has to tread really carefully because if he does anything that, could possibly be a violation of her due process, that could be grounds for, a different outcome down the line that maybe the state or prosecutor would not want to see. So it's a really tough position here.
Yeah, it's a balance. And you can't help also every time a trial like this comes up, we talk about money. That has been brought up, even before this trial. Is it worth taxpayer dollars, to fund this trial? And so I'm sure any delay, there's not that is what drives the decisions, but I'm sure that also, there's somewhere in Trina Kay's mind that, are we being wasteful? Can we be as mindful of this as we can and keep it as succinct as possible. And as she said, let's not, what it sounds like, she also doesn't want to keep doing day by day by day.
No,
I would
that's
guess
horrible.
I would guess if she doesn't get better by Wednesday, we might see a longer delay or maybe a rescheduling for maybe potentially even weeks in the future is what it's sounding like, that they're really wanting to say, let's do this or let's call it off for a significant amount of time and kind of regroup.
Yeah. And at one point, the judge, he says, well, we want to do what we can to salvage this, pool that we've already paneled. We've already screened these jurors. They've now come in twice without any forward motion for the most part. They did wind up releasing one guy today who said he had a camping trip on Friday. So they, when I say inching along, I feel like they're trying to do as much as they can to get this back on track. And there was a slight buffer. You heard, in that last little clip there that,
Right.
well, maybe the 24th and 25th of June are options. Originally, they, thought that could be something we could get into, but then the trial was expected to be shorter. So it was, there is a little bit of wiggle room here. But I think, yeah, as you said, and as the judge said, it's, it's if we possibly do move into a July or an August,
Right.
that, I'll still be here. It'll still be the same circumstances. So you're only kicking the can down the road here. You're not really, getting out of anything in particular.
Sure. And now maybe by Wednesday, I mean, what will also be interesting to see is if by Wednesday, do we have an actual doctor's note? I mean, considering that all of this is happening, I would imagine that perhaps the jail will be able to have her be seen, maybe be able to validate some of what she's saying, and at least provide the court with some of that documentation. Does she have a fever? Is she, what kind of symptoms are they seeing? What kind of, if there's anything that they're able to note medically, I'm sure that would also help to kind of decide what is happening. And of course, if there's a diagnosis, as you said, that's going to change things as well.
Yeah. And Andrea, just to show our reporting process here, I asked the sheriff's office, Maricopa County Sheriff's Office here in Arizona, they have custody of her. I, put in a request saying, hey, is there any, she claimed to be taken from her cell today when she didn't want to be. She, was said that, and we'll get into this in a moment, just how she described being taken to the courtroom today. But I asked, can we get that video? Can we see this? Is any of this documented? We want to see that too. And of course, when it comes to an inmate's health records, sometimes those are challenging to get due to HIPAA laws and just privacy concerns. So we may not know exactly what's going on here, but it sounds like Lori Vallow Daybell has been vocal enough in the courtroom to discuss, what ailments she has. She mentioned having possibly a fever. She said nausea, chills, a terrible headache. So, not a situation anyone wants to be in. And I want to bring it back to something you mentioned earlier, Andrea. Now that I mentioned MCSO, we here at 12 News did an analysis after the verdict in her last trial to see how much we've been paying to keep her here while she's going through both of these trials. And the tally I had, this would have been right at the end of April. It was more than $80,000, if I'm remembering correctly. So these are tens of thousands of dollars. And of course, we know that there were costs and expenses in Idaho as well. And it's not cheap to fly in witnesses and to keep them here, to book them in hotels. So there's really, a big ripple effect to any sort of delay like this that is unexpected. Because, as we've talked about before, the judge, the state, everyone, it seems like there were opportunities to maybe continue this at various points, whether Lori Vallow Daybell wanted more time to prepare, to bring in her own witnesses, to do her experts, and she just never wanted to do that. She wanted to go forward with this. So that's where we find ourselves now.
Right. So we're waiting until Wednesday. Is that right? What happens now?
So we're waiting until Wednesday, and Vallow Daybell actually, in a sense, objected to that, saying, Wednesday might be too soon. I don't know if I'll feel better. I don't know what, they haven't responded to, you heard them say the tank request, like they, it's not clear what sort of treatment she'd be getting, what her day looked like after she left the courtroom today. But I do want to walk you guys through what she said before leaving the courtroom, because she had some pretty, again, strong words for the judge before she got out of there today. Take a listen.
All right, I think I do need to bring the jurors in to tell them something. So can we have Ms. Daybell sit in a regular chair and not, and bring the wheelchair out into the hallway?
Yeah, try and fix it.
I don't think that I can even sit here. I need to go lay down. I don't understand. I don't think, last time you said it was going to be 15 minutes, it was an hour and a half where I was sitting here trying not to throw up on TV in front of the jurors.
Which maybe we could, all of us leave and they could come in and just speak with you.
That's fine.
I've had that happen before where none of the parties are here and the court just advises that we're unable to proceed today.
I don't know about you rescheduling this for Wednesday. It puts a lot of pressure on me to be better and ready for Wednesday. And if I'm not, I don't like to disappoint people. I don't like putting people out of their way, all the jurors and all these things, and all the pressure is on me. That's not going to help me get any better anytime soon.
What is your suggestion?
I don't know, but I'm saying so tomorrow, if I'm not better and I let my team know, are you going to drag me in here like you did today with the team that came to get me, they felt so sorry for me to have to get dragged out of bed to be here?
Yeah, the answer is yes. I probably will order that you be here Wednesday. We'll take tomorrow off. Because I need to confirm how you're feeling. You because you represent yourself, no one else can waive your own appearance.
You're welcome to come over to the jail and come to my cell and see how I'm doing in there.
All right, I'll take a pass on that.
Take a pass on that. The invite to the jail cell to see how I'm doing, it's a hard pass from the judge.
Yeah, and the courtroom people who were in there kind of were like, oh my gosh, I can't believe she just said that, and then I can't believe that is how this transpired, because it was just such a, I don't know, shocking moment just a bit of a jaw dropper, I think, because I don't know, when you hear her say, I didn't plan for this. I hate disappointing people. I want to remind people that this woman has been convicted of murdering her children and convicted of conspiring to kill her husband's first wife, her own former husband. And it's, I find it hard to balance those two things. Some of the things that she's saying here.
Yeah, I would agree with you, and it is something we try to be, try to look at it very objectively, but there is also the facts that we know up to this point, and it is difficult to listen to her, talk about so much pressure. How am I possibly going to get well with all this pressure? There's a little bit of a, you can't help but kind of feel the eye roll happening, probably, in the courtroom, okay, that becomes a little melodramatic, it seems. And we have seen that part of Lori Vallow Daybell. We have seen a little more of the theatrical parts of her, just not under these circumstances. And so, yes. And of course, what he was trying to do was just get her out of the wheelchair into a chair so that they would avoid any potential bias there, or any potential, the jury seeing her in a wheelchair can affect the way that they view her. And so they're always very, very cautious of that, and not having, that's the reason they don't, wear their prison uniform when they are in trial and things like that. And so that's what he's trying to do. And just as you have said several times, really trying to be very cautious of anything that could potentially cause any kind of perception to be skewed, and then, of course, then lead to possible mistrial or some sort of cause for appeal. That's what he's trying to be very careful. And again, what do we do now? So he said, yes, probably will have you come in here again. Right, short of being hospitalized, I'm sure that could, if something changes between now and then, meaning, she is taken to a hospital or something, dramatically changes, I would assume then he would be willing to adjust. But short of that, I don't know what else he can do.
Yeah, and he, she again describes being dragged out to come into the courtroom today, and he says, well, I'll have to do that again, because how else am I supposed to know how you're doing? You are the one responsible for this trial. You chose to represent yourself. And, it's interesting. All of this is unfolding, Andrea, without those possible jurors in the courtroom. Our understanding, it's about more than 50 people now. The pool had whittled down a little bit since Friday, and it appeared that a lot of these people showed up. So all of this is unfolding. Eventually, both the prosecution and Vallow Daybell and her advisory council left. These possible jurors were brought in, and Judge Boresky was essentially like, this is really embarrassing. I am so sorry to have to do this. He was profusely apologizing to these people, but he's like, something has come up. He didn't mention an illness. He didn't mention it was the defense, but he said something has come up that essentially makes it unable for us to move forward today. And in fact, we won't be moving forward until Wednesday at this point. So you guys will have to come back on Wednesday. I'm really sorry about this. He kept saying that over and over. And something he said too, Andrea, was that in all his years on the bench, he has never seen something like this play out. He's never had to do this before. So
and that
he's,
matches
again,
with
very
those,
cognizant of the strain that this could possibly putting on these possible jurors. And something he said before releasing them again for the day was like, don't look this up. But I can imagine if I'm a juror sitting here, okay, we got called in twice, something's happening. We see all this media sitting in the back corner here. What is going on? I feel like I would be very tempted to, try to dig deeper. Again, I'm not a possible juror on this case. That's not, what I was advised to do, but I just would imagine that the wheels are probably already spinning as to what is going on here.
Right. Well, and if you don't want to be a juror, which some people don't, some people, would love to be a juror, and you hear people say that. Other people I have heard say, I don't want to be a juror. That would be a very, very quick way to be excused, as if you didn't follow the judge's order and disclose that when you came back in. But hopefully, of course, that there is a process. We do need a jury of our peers in that courtroom. So hopefully that pool will hang tight. And so that's what we're going to do. We're going to hang tight. We're going to wait. So we will not be inside the courtroom tomorrow. But on Wednesday, presumably we will be in the courtroom for voir dire, the jury selection process in that morning. And then hopefully, assuming that goes well, then they will expect to move into opening statements, right?
Of course. Yeah. And Andrea, just to, refresh people's memories, we have that pool of more than 50. It's, hopefully these people aren't, don't become tainted by researching something or looking something up. But, both sides were pretty confident saying, last week saying, okay, we got good numbers here. They're only looking for 16 people. 12 of those people will ultimately deliberate. They have 4 that will be alternates, but that's the number we're looking for here, is just 16 people out of that 50-something number. So it seems like that could go forward pretty smoothly if everyone's feeling well come Wednesday, but that's the expectation. And realistically, though, we won't know until Wednesday morning whether Vallow Daybell feels well enough to return to the courtroom, unless we get some notice or something from the court before. But it might just be a wait and see on that day. But you're absolutely right. That is the expectation, that jury selection will move forward, and that process would be the judge asking questions of the jurors to try and weed them out. Then the state has the opportunity to do so. And then Vallow Daybell herself will have the opportunity to ask some questions to kind of gauge bias or different things that you maybe would want to know about a possible juror. So again, I can understand why she wants to be there and be part of that process, but there's also a lot that's happening where she's just going to be sitting there too. So certainly an interesting precipice we find ourselves on here with this case.
Well, it is her right to be there. And of course, that is the court's job, is to protect those rights. So they will take that break. We will not be here tomorrow, but we will take you inside the courtroom Wednesday. For whatever happens, we will bring you that here, and we hope you're with us. We'll see you then.